This is lesson 1.3, where we're going to be learning about calculating the midpoint of a line segment when we're given 2 points on the coordinate plane. So what I would like you to do is make sure you have a pencil to write these notes, and make sure, of course, that you're writing in your learning target. Today you're going to be calculating a midpoint of a line segment. And so let's define midpoint, okay? If we break this word down into 2 parts, we can say that the first part of the word says mid, okay, or we could identify that as meaning middle, and a point is just a spot on a line segment or on a line, but we're dealing with segments because they're going to end, there's going to be an end point at each end of the segment. So the midpoint of a segment is the point that divides the segment into 2 congruent segments. And this is a good place for me to introduce a new symbol for you. The word congruent can be represented by this symbol. Looks like an equal sign, but it has a little squiggly over the top of it. So 2 congruent segments are created when we find the midpoint of it. So what if we had a piece of licorice? A piece of licorice, and I'm sure you may have done this before, has 2 endpoints, right? And let's call one of those endpoints C and the other one L. If we were to bend point C on top of point L, bend the licorice and touch those 2 points together, there would be a halfway point, and that halfway point is where you may fold it and then pinch it and cut the piece of licorice in half right at that midpoint. So if you see a segment drawn and it has a little tick mark like this, those black tick marks indicate congruence of the segments. So if I was to write this out, it would be that CM, segment CM, is congruent to segment ML, and the reason is because M is the midpoint. It's the halfway point between C and L. All right, we're going to look at some problems in just a few minutes where we'll see the tick marks, but we may also see the length of those segments so we can tell how long the other segment is. Okay, so going back to our vocabulary, if we go back to our vocabulary, we see that we have a vocabulary term, segment bisector. Well, what is a segment bisector? It could be a point, like we have here, point M. It could be a ray. If I draw a ray off of here, let's say this is point P. It could be another line. It could be another line segment, or it could be a plane that intersects the segment at its midpoint. Okay, so the main idea is that something, a line, a plane, a ray, a point, is cutting a segment in half. That's called a segment bisector. And the final vocabulary term that we have here, a midpoint or a segment bisector bisects a segment. Okay, so what do we mean by bisects? And that's something that you definitely want to know. It means to cut in half. Okay, so point M is really the place where if we bent that licorice and pinched it tight enough and tore it, we would have 2 congruent segments of licorice. It's the halfway point. It bisects there at point M. Okay, if you have any questions up to this point, write those questions down on your paper. And we would like to go next to the midpoint formula. The midpoint formula says that if point A and point B are points in a coordinate plane, then the midpoint M has coordinates, and we're going to write this formula in here, x1 plus x2, and then once you get the sum of those 2 x values, you're going to divide by 2. So that's just to find the x value, but we also need to find the y value. So we're going to take the first y value of one of the points, and then the y value of the second point, add them together, and divide by 2. So one of the things that I want you to remember is that the midpoint has both an x and a y value. You need to have an x and a y value, but the way that you find it is by taking the x values of the 2 endpoints and adding them together, divide by 2, and taking the 2 y values of the endpoints of a segment and divide those by 2. All right, so we have to do that for each pair of points that we get. So on a coordinate plane, if we had point here, let's just say 3, 4, and another point over here, 5, 7, we would find the midpoint somewhere right in here, right? And to do that, we would be adding the two x values together, dividing by 2, and then of course taking the two y values, adding those together and dividing by 2. That would get us the x and y value of point M, the midpoint. So we're going to try that out on this video, and you'll get some practice at it after the video as well. So for example number 1, we need to find a segment length. We just learned that the word bisect means that we're cutting something in half, and the something is a line segment. So in the diagram, line L, and we see it's called line L right here because it has a little L, bisects segment AC at point B, and segment AB is 8 inches. Okay, so this segment right here, just from A to B, is 8 inches, and they want us to find the length of AC. AC starts at A and goes all the way to C. So if we know that from A to B, just from this to this is 8, how long is segment AC, which is actually twice as long? And let's keep in mind that the tick mark that you see on here indicates that we have two congruent segments. Segment AB is congruent to segment BC because of those green tick marks that I just highlighted. So if AB is 8, then that means BC is 8, which means that the entire length of AC must be 16, right? And the reason for that is because AB plus BC is going to equal the whole length of AC, which is 8 plus 8, and that's kind of how we can prove that we know that AC is 16. So you get some practice problems here, numbers 1 through 4 at the bottom of your page. Please make sure you read carefully each problem. It says find AC if AB is 10. Okay, so B, remember, is the midpoint, and the reason you know that is because you have a couple of tick marks here showing that those are the same exact length. Please read each statement carefully so that you don't just assume that the question is asking the same question as the previous problem. I think you'll find that number 4 is slightly different than the others, so be careful and really read and look at which segment they're asking you to find. Let's take a look at the example number 2 that's on the back of your note sheet. It says use the midpoint formula. So tomorrow you're going to be looking at the distance formula, but today we'd like to just focus on the midpoint formula. So the midpoint formula is on the front of your page, and on this coordinate plane over here we're given 2 points. We're given point B and point A. Now if you recall, the x value is listed first in each of these ordered pairs, and the y value is listed second in each of the ordered pairs. Now we are charged with finding the x and y values of point M, which is the midpoint. All right, so they gave us A and B. We need to take the two x values. Remember, it does not matter which x value you call x1 or x2. All right, so just pick one and stick with that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the two x values, 3 from point A and 6 from point B, and I need to divide by 2. So this is just for x. Okay, I have 9 on the top and 2 on the bottom, which gives me 4.5, 4.5. All right, what if I do the same thing with my y values? So to calculate the y value of point M, I'm going to take 2 from point A and 7 from point B and divide by 2. So it looks like we have 9 on top, and we're going to divide by 2. So my y value is also going to be 4.5. So to finish this problem, I'm just going to write in that point M has an x value of 4.5 and a y value of 4.5. So if you look at the graph itself, going over 1, 2, 3, 4, and a little bit more, half, and I go straight up, am I going to get to point M? Okay, it looks like I did go 4.5 in the x direction, and if I go up from the origin 1, 2, 3, 4, a little bit past that, it looks like I do get up 4.5 as well. So you can see that my x and y values are correct because just plotting point M there where it's plotted, you can see that 4.5 comma 4.5 is an accurate ordered pair for point M. So a lot of students forget that they're looking for two values for the midpoint. You want to get your x value, but you also want to get your y value. So think of this as an actual ordered pair that you're finding, not just a single number. And even though they don't give you the actual graph paper version of point A and point B on these practice problems, I want you to imagine that you have these, graphed on a coordinate plane, and this is an XY pair, and here's another ordered pair, X and Y, and so you have to calculate the midpoint. That's what they're asking you to do on these last four problems. So if I was to do that, I'm going to do this number 5 with you. I'm looking for point M. Remember the X and Y value for point M, which is the halfway point between point A and point B. I'm going to take the two x values, add them together, divide by 2, and so I get 4 divided by 2, or just 2. That's my x value for point M. Now I also have to do that for my y values because remember point M has an x and a y, so I'm going to take my 2 and my 6 and divide those by 2, and I get 8 divided by 2, which is 4. Okay, so now I have my ordered pair for point M, which is the midpoint. It is halfway. Remember, point M is halfway between the 2 points that I've been given. Halfway between. Okay, go ahead and try 6, 7, and 8, and we'll verify your answers in class. Thanks for watching.